Hey guys, welcome back. In this video, I'll be showing you how you can implement authentication into your React application using a service called Supabase. If you're not familiar with Supabase, Supabase is an open source backend-as-a-service platform that provides hosted backend services for app development, and this includes a PostgreSQL database, authentication, and file storage, to name a few. And we're going to be focusing on authentication in this tutorial, so without further ado, let's begin. First, you want to head over to supabase.com. And on this homepage, you want to click this Start Your Project button. And when redirected to this page, you'll be asked to sign into your account. And if you already have an account with Supabase, you may sign in. But if you do not, please click the Sign Up Now link below the form and sign up and sign into the platform. Okay, so I've signed into Supabase and I'm given this form to fill out to create a new organization. And this is likely what you'll see if this is your first time using Supabase. So the first thing we'll be asked to fill out regarding these details is a name, and you can leave the name as the default name here, and the type can remain as personal, and you'll click Create Organization. And upon creating the organization, you're going to be asked to fill out some details regarding our project. Now, for our project, I'm just going to name this React Authentication. And if you've used Supabase in the past or have other organizations that you want to create this project in, you can just select an organization from this dropdown. But obviously, since I'm assuming this is your first time, I'm going to just select the organization that I created previously. So I've typed in the project name, and then we're going to need a strong database password. So I'm just going to type out a strong password. And you can leave the region to the default region, because this is going to offer the best performance, and you won't have to worry about security options or advanced configuration for right now. So we'll just click Create New Project. And once you click Create New Project, you'll be redirected to this page where your project is being set up, and if you give it some time, it'll be completed, and I'll be back once it's done. So here, as you can see, my project has completed setup, and I've also opened my React app within my code editor, and I created this React app using Vite, and it's titled React Supabase. And what we're going to be doing now is installing the Supabase package within our project, and then we're going to create a Supabase client that will have access to our Supabase project so that we can create our authentication system. So what I'm going to do first is I'm just going to open up the terminal within my React application, and then here I'm going to run npm install @supabase/supabase.js. And once it's finished installing, I'm going to go to our project here on the web page, and I'm going to access the sidebar. And what I'm going to do is go to project settings, and then we're going to go and click API, and here's the information that we're going to need to extract from this API settings page. So before we extract this information, I'm going to create a helper file, or helper folder, sorry, within my source directory. And I'm just going to do that by clicking this icon and then creating a folder called helper. And then within this helper folder, I'm just going to create a new file, and I'm going to title it Supabase client.js. And here we're going to do import create client from Supabase.js, and then we're going to store the Supabase URL to our project, and then we're going to have the Supabase anonymous key for our project, and we can find that data right here. So the project URL is this RESTful endpoint, and we're just going to copy this and we're just going to paste it within a string. Okay. There we go. And then we're going to do the same thing for the anonymous key. So the anonymous key can be located down below. So we'll just copy this and paste it right there. Now, if you guys are creating this project to deploy, I would of course recommend that you put the URL and anonymous key within a .env file and then extract the URL and anonymous key using the appropriate method. But since this is a video meant for demonstration purposes, I'm just going to store them in plain text within this file right here. And then now that we have the Supabase URL and anonymous key stored, we're going to create our Supabase instance that will connect to our project here. So we're going to do this by creating a new variable called Supabase, and this is just going to equal create client, and we're going to pass in the Supabase URL and the Supabase anonymous key. So the reason that we're doing this is because we're trying to create a connection between our project here and our project. So to establish that connection, we're going to need to first put the RESTful endpoint for querying and managing our database, since that's where all of our users will be stored, which is why we're passing in the Supabase URL as the first parameter. And then we're passing in this anonymous key so that we can access the database as well as perform operations on it, and this has the necessary credentials for that. So after having this done, we just need to export this Supabase instance so that whenever we're developing a web page or a page within our application, we can import this Supabase instance and use it for authentication purposes. So we'll just do export default Supabase so that whenever we import anything from this file, we're going to import this Supabase instance here. Alright, so I've full screened my code editor here because we're not going to need to access our Supabase project dashboard at the moment, and our next set of operations is going to include installing React Router and creating the pages that are necessary for this authentication application. So I'm going to first start off by installing React Router, and if you don't know what React Router is, I would recommend that you check out my video on it, as it is pretty informative and we're going to be using it throughout this lesson. So I'll do npm install React Router and React Router DOM. And if you give it a second or two, it'll finish installing. And then once we've installed it, I'm going to head on over to my app.jsx file, and here I'm just going to remove everything. And I'm going to use the rfce snippet to create a boilerplate function component, and if you are wondering how I did that, then make sure to install the ES7 snippets extension right here. But back to our application, I'm going to then import browser router to set up the React router, and we're going to import these from React Router DOM. And what we're going to do here is do return browser router. So this is going to wrap our entire application within a router. And then we're going to store our routes, and then each route will be stored using this route tag here. And we're going to have a total of 4 routes, and that's going to be our home page along with a register, login, and dashboard. So register, login, and dashboard. So what we're going to do is we're basically going to have a component that includes a route to our home page, and that home page is going to have links to our register and login pages. And then when a user registers using the register route, they're going to be logged into their dashboard upon completing registration, and then within their dashboard, they'll have the feature to log out and be redirected to this login page where they can choose to log in again. And if they visit the home page, they can choose to register or log in. So that's going to be our focus for right now. And to complete that, we're going to need to create a pages directory within our source folder. So we're going to go to create a new pages directory. And then within this pages directory, we're going to create, again, the 4 routes. So we're going to have home.js, then we're going to have register.js, and then we're going to have login.js, and then we're going to have dashboard.js. And within these files, I'm just going to create a function component. And now that we have this configured, we can work on customizing these files here to have the necessary links and function. All right, so before we proceed, I'd like to mention a mistake that I made and how we can fix it. And the mistake was having all of these files end in .js instead of .jsx. And the reason that we need to change these to .jsx is because these are going to be rendered as components within this React application. So this transition is necessary. And now that we've renamed them to JSX, I'd also like to mention that I've removed all the code from my app.css and index.css so that we avoid any styling constraints from the boilerplate code. And what we're going to do now is import all of these routes within this app.jsx file so that we can render these pages within these route tags here. So to import each one, we're going to do import home from pages home, and then we're going to import the register. Same with login and dashboard. And now that we've imported these components, basically, we're going to set the path for each of these routes and display the respective component. So we're going to do that by configuring this route to have a path. Well, at least for the home route, we're going to have a path set to /, and then the component that's displayed here is going to be element, and then we're just going to pass in the home function here. And then we're going to do the same thing for register, login, and dashboard. So we'll just do path is equal to register, element, and we'll just do register. And the same thing with login, element, there we go, and the same thing with dashboard. So for dashboard, we're going to have a path set to / dashboard, and this one is going to be our protected route. So there we go. So now that we have these routes set up, I'm going to minimize my file browser, and I'm going to move my code editor to the right. And we don't need to worry about the Supabase dashboard at the moment, so I'm just going to start running my web server, and we're going to do this by doing npm run dev. And once it's running on localhost 5173, I'm just going to access that URL right here, and here you can see our home page. So currently we're on /, and that's what's displayed on home. If we go to / register, we see our register page, and it's the same with login along with the dashboard. And our goal is to ensure that the dashboard is a protected route, meaning that we can't access it unless we are logged in. So first thing, I'm going to set up the register and login links within my homepage. And to do that, I'm going to go to my homepage here, and I'm going to import link from React Router DOM. And this is going to be necessary for us to create a link tag that will link our homepage to our register and login pages. So I'm going to just render a link tag here and another one, and then this is going to be titled register, and then this one is going to be titled login. And we need to import it in curly brackets. Sorry. There we go. And I'm just going to add a line break so that these are separated. And here on the web page, you can see that those changes have been reflected. And now we need to have the route for each of these tags. So for register, it's just going to be linked to register. For login, it's going to be linked to login. So now if we click on register, we're redirected to the register page. And if I were to click on login, we're redirected to the login page. So now that we have this done, we can start working on the register page, where we can build a form that will allow us to add a user to our database, and we will be able to access that user by accessing our Supabase dashboard here as well. So for the register page, we're going to start off by creating the form, and then we're going to work on the functionality of that form and actually getting the user to sign up. So to do this, we're going to first import useState so that we can use state variables to keep track of the information that the user enters in. And we're going to create 3 useState variables, and they're going to be email, set email, because this is the method of signing up that the user is going to use, and by default it's just going to be an empty string. And then we're going to have the same for the user's password. And if you're unfamiliar with useState, I would recommend that you check out my video on it, which I'll link in the top right corner of the video. And then we're also going to store a message within a state variable, so that if there are any issues with signing up, then we can display those issues within this message state variable and have that rendered on the web page. So now that we have this done, we're going to move on to creating our actual form. So to create the form, I'm going to just remove this line here, and I'm going to focus on creating a div tag and then have h2 with a register header. And then below this header, I'll just add a line break. We're going to do a form, and within this form, we're going to have 2 input fields. So this first input field is going to be for the user email, and then the second one is going to be for their password. So first one, we're going to do input type is equal to email, and we'll set a placeholder as well, and we'll just put email. And then the second one is going to be a password, so it's going to be input type password, and we'll set a placeholder to be password. There we go. And then we're going to add a submit button. So we'll have button, and then this button is going to be of a type for submitting. So we'll do type is equal to submit, and then let's just do create account within the button. And now what we need to do is make sure that whatever we type into these forms, or into these input fields, we need to ensure that that data is kept track of within these state variables, because we're going to be passing in the data from these state variables to create our account. So to do that, what we're going to do is within the input field here, this first one, I'm going to ensure that one, this is a required input field, and then we'll have on change, and then we're going to set the email to e.target.value. And what this will do is for every key press or every change that is identified within this field here, it's going to update those changes within the state variable so that this state variable has the most up-to-date information. And then we're also going to bind this to the value of that state variable by passing in this value parameter. And then we're going to be doing the same thing with the password as well. So we're going to first make it a required field, because you need to have a password in order to sign up. And then we'll do on change again, and we'll just do set password to equal the event's target value, okay? And then we'll also bind this with the password. And now that we have this completed, we need to add a onSubmit form to our form tag here, so that whenever we click the submit button, we know which function to call in terms of registration. So for doing that, we need to create a function called handle submit. So we'll just use a const handle submit. And since this is an asynchronous process, this is going to be an async function. It's going to take in an event, and then we're going to do event.prevent default so that the web page doesn't refresh automatically. And there we go. And then we're going to set the message to be an empty string initially, because if we are signing up for an account or signing up for another account, then we want to make sure that whatever the message was previously, if there was a message that had already been set, is emptied first. And then now we're going to do const data and error, which are going to be things that are returned by our Supabase service. And we also need to import that service as well. So we're going to do import Supabase from the Supabase client that we made earlier, okay? And you can ignore this error right now, we're going to fix it. So we'll do await supabase.auth.signup. And what this will do here is that it will call this Supabase client and connect to our Supabase project and use this sign up method to sign up a user. So we'll have email, we're going to pass in the email that's created and stored within the state variable here. And then the password is just going to be equal to the password that's also stored within the state variable. And then all of the security processes like hashing this password and ensuring that this data is stored securely will be done with this supabase.auth.signup function, because this is something that Supabase handles and we don't have to do this ourselves, okay? And this function is going to return data or error. And if we have an error, then we want to set our error message to be displayed, right? So we'll do set message equal to error.message, and we'll just end the execution of this function there because no other step needs to be completed. And then if we have data, meaning that our request was successful, then we're just going to put set message user account created. So this is what we have so far. And we also need a way to display this message. So let's say that we encounter some error when registering. Let's say we enter in an email that already exists within our database. Then that's going to give us a message saying that an account already exists with that email. So to display a message of that sort, we would need to do message. And if we have a message, then we're just going to display it like so. So what this is doing is using this ternary operator and just saying, if we have a message and it exists, then we're just going to display it within this empty tag. All right, or actually I should make this a span tag. There we go. So now we need to link this handle submit function to this form. So we'll just do on submit. It's going to handle the submit. And now if we try to enter in an email, so let's say I enter in this email here, and then I enter in a password and create the account. So now it says user account created. And also I just want to clear out the email and password field as well once creation is completed, so that we don't see this here after the creation. And if we go back to our Supabase project and then click this authentication, then you can see that we have our user created, and the user ID is generated by Supabase. The email is placed there along with other information that Supabase requires. Okay, so now that we have this user registration process created, let's run this one more time just to give you a clear idea of how this works. So I'll do another email address and I'll type it in again. So far what's happened is that whatever I've typed in has been stored within these two state variables due to the onChange events here. And then whenever I click the submit button or this create account button, what this will do is call the onSubmit for this form, and that's going to call this handle submit function. And what this will do is it will prevent the web page from reloading by default. It'll set any previous messages we have to be an empty string, and then it's going to call the Supabase service to sign up the user using the email that was entered in and stored in the state variable, and the same thing with the password. And if there is an error with our request, then it's going to set an error message to be displayed, and then it's going to end the execution of the rest of the function because there's an error. Otherwise, a response, which is going to be stored within this data, it's going to set the message to be user account created, and then it's going to reset the fields to have nothing in them in case we want to register another user. So now I'll click create. There we go. So now it's created the account and has emptied these fields, which is how we're supposed to register a user. So now we can work on logging them in as well as creating the protected dashboard. And let's view our database once more. And if we refresh, you can see that the second user is also displayed here. All right, so now we can begin our login process, but before we begin our login, we need to change a configuration within our Supabase project here. So whenever we sign up right now, what's happening is that Supabase is sending a verification email to the email that we are signing up with, and unless that email has been verified, then the user is not able to log in. And that hinders our simple authentication process. Now, if that's something that you'd like to keep within your application, feel free to do so. But for the purpose of this video, I'm going to be turning that feature off. And if you would also like to do that, what you can do is click this right here, and then under configuration, you're going to click providers. And right here next to email where it says enabled, you're going to select this and you're going to toggle off confirm email. And then you're going to save these changes. And upon saving these changes, we can begin with our login. Now, before we do anything else, I've opened my database here in a new tab, and you can access this by just going to users. And what I'm going to do is delete both of these users. And the reason for deleting both of these users is because although we've applied the email confirmation changes, those changes remain unconfirmed for those user accounts, which would prevent us from logging in unless we confirm the emails. So I've deleted these accounts and I'm going to recreate them so that the new accounts will inherit these changes. So now we're going to go back to the registration, and I'm just going to recreate each account. So this is the first account and then the second account. There we go. And now these accounts have been created with the adjusted changes that we made in these email settings here. And now we can move on to our login, but before we do, I want to add something on our register page. So on most register pages, they'll typically have a link to access the login page in case a user already has an account and are on the register page. So to add that, we need to first import link from React Router DOM, as this will allow us to navigate between the register and login pages. And then below the form, we're just going to have log in, and actually above the form, we'll just have a span that says already have an account. And then we'll do link to login, and this matches with our path here in app.jsx. And if we go to our register page again, you can see that we have that here. So if we already have an account, we can click the login and we're redirected to the login page. And now we can begin working on our login page, and our login page is going to have a very similar look and logic to or compared to our register page. So I'm going to first go into the login.js file, and I'm going to have the same imports first. So I'm just going to copy this. I'm going to paste it here because we're going to be using useState for the form, and we're going to be using Supabase for authentication, and we're also going to have a link to the register page in case a user who does not have an account is trying to log in. We want to be able to provide them with a route to navigate to the register page. So to get this done, I'm going to first copy all of the code here, and I'm going to paste it. And the reason that I'm doing this is because, again, these pages have very similar logic, and we just need to update a few details for the login page to work correctly. So I'm just copying and pasting some of the code here. And then we're going to do the same thing for the actual web page here. And I'll just replace this with, there we go. And then we're going to change this from register to login because this is the login page. We're going to have our message, so in case there are any issues with logging in, say that an account doesn't exist or there are invalid account credentials, then we're going to, of course, have some issues with logging in. We have our regular input forms that are affecting the state variables in the same way, and those state variables are, again, email and password. And then for our submit button, instead of being create account, it's going to be log in. And instead of already have an account, we're just going to put don't have an account, and then we'll navigate to the register page. And this is the route for it. So now we have our login web page complete. Now we need to update the function. So before, what we were doing was whenever an event happened, we would prevent the web page from automatically reloading. We would reset the message to be an empty string, and then we would sign the user up. Now all we need to update here is sign in with password. Since we are using password authentication, we're going to be calling supabase.auth sign in with password function, and this function will just take in an email address and the password, and of course we're going to pass in the email that is stored within the state variable and the password that is stored within this state variable, and this will return either data or error. And if we have an error, then we're going to set an error message to our or within our message state variable, and then when we do have a message, then we're just going to display it within a span tag. And if we don't get an error message, then we're going to get data, and then this would just say, user account created if we were to register, right? But for logging in, we want to navigate the user to the dashboard. So to do this, I'm also going to import a hook called useNavigate from React Router DOM, and we're just going to create a instance of that hook by doing navigate and set it equal to this useNavigate function. And then instead of user account created, we're just going to navigate to the dashboard, and then we'll return null because this would be ending the execution of this function. Now let's try this. Now I have two accounts within my Supabase dashboard, so I'll try with one of them by entering in an invalid password. So I have my email there, and then let's just say I enter in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, which is not my password, of course, and I try to click login. So here you can see that it says invalid login credentials because the password is incorrect. Now if I were to, let's say, try to log in with an account that does not exist, so I've entered in an email that has not been registered yet, and I try to log in, you can see that it says invalid login credentials again, okay? And also let's move this set email and set password to here, just so that this clears out. So if I try to log in again, these fields are cleared out for a new entry. So now let's try logging in with valid credentials, and I'll type in my password. And here you can see that I am redirected to the dashboard, meaning that this navigate dashboard function is also working correctly. And now that we've logged in, we also want to add a way for the user to log out. So for the user to log out, we're going to go into our dashboard.js file, and we're going to make some changes here. Above here, we added the Supabase import, so I'm just going to paste that import here. And currently, we're not going to need to rely on the useState variable. So I'll just remove or the use state hook, so I'll just remove that. And here what we're going to do is just give the user a message that they're currently logged in. So we'll do hello, you are logged in, and then we'll give them a button where they can sign out. Okay, and we're going to first create a function called sign out, and this is going to be an asynchronous function. And whenever this function is called, what we're going to do is call the Supabase function to sign out. So we const error, and because this is one of the things that can be returned by the sign out function. So we'll do Supabase auth sign out. So we're going to have this asynchronous process run, and we're going to wait for the sign out function to provide a response. And if we have an error, then we're going to throw that error onto the screen. Otherwise, we'll just navigate back to the login page. And to do that, we need to import use navigate from React Router DOM. And then navigate to login. So now if we need to link this button with this sign out function. So we're going to do onClick call the sign out function. So I've saved my changes again, and if I click sign out, you can see that we are signed out and are redirected to the login page. Now, what I want you to notice is that when we try to access the dashboard without being logged in, we are still able to access it, even though this should be a protected route. And that is the next issue that we need to solve. So to solve this issue, we need to create something called a wrapper. And the wrapper will basically be a component that will encompass the dashboard page. And what the wrapper is going to do is that it will look for a session within our website. And if there is a session, then it's going to allow access to the dashboard page. And if there is not a session, then it's basically going to redirect the user to the login page where they can log in and view the dashboard. So within my pages directory, I'm just going to create a component called wrapper.jsx. And to start off, I'm going to import a few dependencies, and I'm just going to paste these in here right now. So we're going to need React, useEffect, and useState. And if you are not familiar with useEffect, I have a video on it, which you can check out on the top right-hand corner of the screen. And then we're going to be using navigate, and we won't need useLocation. All right, and we obviously have the Supabase client import. And then after this, we're going to create our function. So we'll just have function wrapper. This is going to take in children, and since this component essentially wraps around a page, the children will represent the page that it's wrapping around so that we can display the content of that page later. Then we're going to need two state variables, and the first one is going to be authenticated, and it will have a default value of false since we don't know if the user is authenticated yet. And then we're going to have another state variable called loading, which is going to be initially set to true. And then we're going to use a useEffect. And I'm just going to pass in the empty dependency array at the end so that this only runs once. And we're going to create an asynchronous function called getSession, which will get the current session on the web page. And to get this specific session, we're going to access data and then grab session. Okay, and we're going to set this equal to await supabase.auth.getSession. So if a session is returned, it's going to be stored within this session value right here. And then we'll do set authenticated. And set authenticated is going to be a Boolean, so watch closely as to what I do. I'm going to do 2 exclamation points and then do session, and then I'll do set loading is equal to false. Now let me explain what I've done. So this double exclamation point session expression here will essentially convert a value to a Boolean value. So from this session, we're going to be returned one of two things. We're going to be returned null if there isn't a session. And if we are returned null, then what this will essentially look like under the hood is that it's going to be exclamation, exclamation, null. And this will convert to false, meaning that it'll set authenticated to be false, meaning that we're not authenticated, right? But if we have a session, then we're going to have an object. And if we have an object and we have 2 exclamations prefixing it, then it's going to be set to true, meaning that set authenticated is going to be set to true, meaning that we're authenticated and can access the dashboard. And this is just a quirky JavaScript trick that I used right here. And then after we're done with the authentication, we're going to set loading to false because we're no longer waiting for the request from Supabase that retrieves whether or not we have a session. And then lastly, we're just going to call the get session function within this use effect block. And this is the skeleton of how all this is going to work, okay? And then next we're going to have this conditional that basically checks if we're retrieving the session data. And we know that we're retrieving the session data if loading is set to true, which by default, we're going to be loading the session data. And if we're loading, then we're just going to return a div that just says loading to give the user some feedback as to what's going on. Otherwise, we're going to check if we are authenticated. And if we are authenticated, then we're just going to return children. Now what this will do is that if we go on and try to add other pages onto this website and those pages are protected routes, then this wrapper component can encompass that route. And if we're authenticated by simply returning children, we're going to return the content that will be displayed on that route because this children is taking the page as the prop. And if we're not authenticated, meaning that we'll just have a return statement here, we're just going to navigate to the login page, okay? And then last but not least, I'm just going to export as a default right here. And then what I'm going to do is head on over to my app.jsx file, which is here. And I'll do import wrapper. And then let me just move this import down below just so it looks cleaner. And then what I'm going to do is within this element, I'm going to create this wrapper tag and then just place my dashboard page within this tag here. Now, if I go back, or if let me just click sign out so that we're back to login. If I try to access the dashboard, it does not let me access the dashboard like before. And the reason for that is because what's happening under the hood is that this wrapper is running first and it's checking to see whether or not we have a session. And since it detected that session was equal to null, it used this expression here with the double exclamation points and set authenticated to be false. And if we're no longer loading, we're going to check if we're authenticated. And if we are, then we're going to return whatever page was being encompassed by the wrapper. But since we aren't, we're simply returning a redirect to the login page here. Now, if I try to log in using the correct credentials, then of course I can access the dashboard and refreshing, you can see that we're still logged in because there is an active session. Whereas if I sign out and then try to log in again, it doesn't work. And now that we have all of this working, our authentication service works. So that's about it for this video. If this was helpful, make sure to give the video a like and subscribe to my channel for more content. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them down in the comment section or email me, and I'll do my best to respond. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.